All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, a submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. Today's white lightning will be courtesy of soon-to-be Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Jackson Brown, or whatever her name is, who doesn't know that she's a woman, but asserts a woman's right to choose. So
Okay,
square that circle if you can.
so he told me we were going to be talking about gender, so I had to put up he wanted to probably do his Sunday school time, so I put up Lucretius just to piss him off, and wore a shirt with boobies on it. So I'm ready for this.
Okay. I wasn't going to get Sunday schooly, but I can on this issue. So the Senate hearings for this Supreme Court nominee has got this back in the news with Senator Blackburn asking her, "Can you define a woman?" And the judge laughs and says, "Not in this context. I'm not a biologist." There's a lot to unpack just in that one. Sam,
here's the first thing you can unpack. Biologists are allowed to define what a man and a woman is. Can we not now? So we can ask Brett and Heather what they define male and female as, and then we've got the expert opinion, right? I mean, I'm not technically biologist, but I'm physiologist. It's pretty gosh darn close.
Right.
Mine's actually more specific to humans. Is the only difference between physiologist and biologist.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's the first one, but so I've used this example before, but I don't have to cite a source if I'm writing a paper and I say that on December 7th, 1941, the Empire of Japan bombed the US Navy at Pearl Harbor. It's common knowledge. I don't have to cite a source for that. You don't have to be an expert to define what a woman is unless you live in a crazy place.
Now, I didn't know you were going this way with this when you told me about sex versus gender.
Yeah.
Now, woman, the term woman, and this is where the water gets a little murky. Is woman a sex comment label, or is woman a gender label?
See, and all right, I was gonna get there eventually and unpack all this, but let's start there. I don't know exactly where this came from, but from my understanding is this idea that sex and gender aren't the same thing is very new. And in the past, at least in common usage, the only difference between sex and gender is that generally sex was talking about the biological mechanisms of male and female. So it was more of a biological term.
This is a good starting place because we can just go with definitions.
Gender tended to be used as a sociological term, talking about the secondary characteristics that go with those biological facts, those biological mechanisms.
Well, that's not exactly right. Okay, so definition of sex, American Heritage Dictionary. Either of the two divisions designated female and male by which most organisms are classified on the basis of their reproductive organs and functions. Okay, so that's American Heritage Dictionary.
Because sex is referring to reproduction, sexual versus asexual reproduction. So American mechanisms.
American Physiological Society, APS. The noun sex includes the structural, functional, and behavioral characteristics of living things determined by sex chromosomes. So it's similar, but it actually talks specifically to the chromosome. My own definition before looking these up is the phenotype expressed by the allele pairing of the 23rd chromosomes, which would be your sex chromosomes. So whatever you have, XY versus XX versus XXY versus XXX, which do exist. They're very, 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 very rare, but they do exist. Whatever that pairing is going to create a phenotype, which is the expression of genes, basically how it shows up in your physical body. And whatever expression that based on those chromosomes. So I think it's kind of a combination of both, because we do have some murky waters here Now we'll sock you back to that where it gets murky, but we're defining now. So those are the three big definitions that I wanted to throw out. Mine, the dictionary, and the Physiological Association's definition. Now that's sex. Now gender, according to the Heritage Dictionary, is one's identity as female or male, or as neither entirely female nor entirely male. Females or males considered as a group. Now that second part I said is kind of the important part.
Well, to me, that's got to be something new that they've added, because this idea of identity is very new.
Okay, so let's go to APS. Gender can be thought of as the behavioral, cultural, or physiological traits typically associated with one's sex. Now, that's actually an old definition. I looked at the data.
And is in line with what I was saying.
Yes, but there's a cultural aspect to it,
Mhm.
because different cultures are going to assign gender differently. So let's use, for example, like a Viking shield maiden, what it is to be woman, female, what it is to be gender girl is way different than what it is to be gender girl in, say, like an Islamic majority society. And so there is a cultural aspect to what is gender, boy, girl, versus what we just looking at the biology, the chromosomes and how they manifest. And that's where it gets kind of murky. Now, I did hear a good analysis of this from another lawyer where he said she could have still had the same answer, but be much more respectable in that there's a chance he's quoting what he said her answer should have been similar to. There's a chance I will have to hear a case where there will be arguments on both sides of what defines a woman. And so I can't make a ruling without having the arguments presented towards me.
She tried to do that later, because then later when Ted Cruz was questioning her, he went the legal route.
I got beef with his questioning too, but go ahead and finish.
He asked, okay, if you can't define a woman per Senator Blackburn's question, then what happens if a Title III case comes before you where somebody is seeking protection or damages or what have you based on gender discrimination?
And that's where definitions are important. So what I came across just kind of doing some preliminary stuff other than just looking up definitions was the APS, a writing on the importance of not convoluting the two terms, because for two reasons. And I'm going to add the second reason, but the main one for them was there is a difference. One is a cultural identical type of thing, and the other is actual biological facts. And as physiologists, we need to be just dealing with the physiology. And when you use the terms interchangeably, then you muddy the water of what is actually physiological versus what is cultural. And you put that in scientific papers. So somebody later on, and this is where I'm going to add my 2 cents. Now we've got this movement where women can be in sports. Well, now I've got papers in the past that use the gender term for a biological reason that I can cite in my court case because they convoluted the terms, because gender is different than sex. But if you wrote a paper using gender, but you meant sex, you just created canon ammo for someone to use later in the gender
I
debate.
understand what you're saying, but to me that's pure sophistry.
Well, it is, but it makes it important to use the correct terms because you allow for that sophistry to happen.
No, my point is we shouldn't be buying into the premise of the LGBTQAI plus mantra to begin with, that it should be clear in your example. It should be clear within the context what the heck we're talking about, because female or male in the past has been used either to express the biological mechanisms that we talked about with the definition of sex, or the sociological points in the idea of gender. It should be clear within the context, and it has always been understood in a legal context that when we're talking about women, when we're talking about gender discrimination, this is what we're talking about. And now, as Cruz pointed out, based on the mantra of the current left, I can just decide I'm a woman now, and then I can come before you with a Title III complaint. So how are you going to determine if I'm a woman? And that is something she should be able to answer without answering how she would rule in that kind of a case. Because whatever the merits of a particular case or not, it should be, it is, it's not should be, it is cut and dry, black or white. Does this person have standing because they're a woman or a man, or black or white? Because the same would hold true for racial discrimination. I can't just decide I'm black and then file a civil rights complaint.
Which is where the definitions even become more important, because maybe now is the time to establish whether woman is gender or woman is sex. And that's where it comes into it. Now, take that to the legal sense. What is actually actionable items? Can you discriminate based on sex? No. Can you discriminate based on gender? No. You want to muddy the waters? Now they're muddy. And so at that point, you maybe the answer is we should establish what the word woman is referring to. Because I can't go ahead.
I agree and disagree. I agree that we can talk about that and define that culturally as we argue about this current insanity. We don't need to define it legally because it's understood. It's known. You are a man or you are a woman. And now the reason I say we can define that culturally is because this is where, this is where the liberal left has become the regressive left and jumped the shark. And Dave Rubin, back when we used to, listen to him, he made this point several times that I'm glad I grew up gay when I did, because if I grew up gay now, I think people would be pressuring me that, no, you're really a woman in a man's body. Mm-hmm. Because back when
this is a separate conversation for me, because this is an age question, not an identity question.
Well, yeah, that's a whole kettle of fish we can stay away from for the time being.
Remember from our Sexy Time with Sam talks, the only thing against the rules for Sam between the sheets is consent, and children cannot consent. Mm-hmm. And that's a blanket statement. I can be consistent here. Children can also not actually know what their social role is at a young age.
You can be as freaky deaky as you want with what you do with and to your body as an adult. And I can comment on that, but I have no say in what you actually do because you're an adult, right? This is why a minor can't even get a tattoo, because you are permanently scarring your body. You're permanently altering your body. That is something that requires consent. A minor cannot give consent. So this is even outside the realm of, sexual things, anything to do with sex.
Keep in mind that, look at the two big movements that are going hand in hand. It's not the gay rights or the lesbian rights that are going with the trans rights. It's the pedo rights going with the trans rights. They're trying to lower that threshold of consent, and they're piggybacking on each other. They probably, I would assume that most trans people don't like pedos, but at the same time, the two movements are going hand in hand. And this is where I stick by my statement we made a couple times ago, where it's actually the original movement real progressives that actually where progress was needed, it's their job to say, this is the line, and we're not going to go over that because people will hijack your movements. And that's just the way it is. And that's both sides. People will hijack your movement, and it's up to you as the reasonable person that just wanted something reasonable to say, we're not going to let those other people hijack it. You've got to be diligent against that. But back to the man, woman, gender thing. Finish your thoughts, because then I want to
Yeah.
take you down
So
another road.
the point I was getting to with the Dave Rubin example is that back when we were kids, there was this kind of push that it was okay for boys to like girly things. Okay, that boys can show their feelings, boys can talk about their feelings, men can cry, this kind of thing. There was a a push to culturally say it is okay for a man to be somewhat feminine. But at no point did we say then he becomes feminine. He becomes a female. No, that's just your there is a spectrum. That's the buzzword of the day. There is a spectrum of gender in how you express your gender role personally. But that doesn't change what you are. That's you're a male sexually and genderly. All right, whatever. You just happen to oh gosh, I forgot I meant to dig this out. I've got a philosophy textbook from from intro philosophy around here somewhere. So this was 1998 and the book was several years old. So this is not new. This is like CRT. CRT isn't new, it's new culturally. It's been around in academia for a long time. So if you're a big girly man who likes to talk about your feelings and go to your book club and cry at movies. All right, but you're still a man. You're still filling the male role. You just do it differently than I do, who's a big tough John Wayne guy, right? So this philosophy textbook that I've got, I first encountered this back in 1998, 1999 with this bizarre philosophy journal article essentially saying that there are an infinite number of genders because everyone's genitalia is unique and different. Therefore, everyone is their own gender. That was the most insane thing I'd ever read. And yet it fits in perfectly with what we're talking about here. Just because your penis and testes are different than the guy next to you doesn't mean you're not a guy. Doesn't mean he's a guy and you're a guy. And that's what we're talking about with this bizarre the plus at the end. That's why I always make sure I put the plus at the end when I give the acronym for the Rainbow Mafia, because it shows the absurdity of what we're doing here. It's never ending. It's whatever anyone can think up. Well, there you go. There's a new gender.
Well, let me establish a couple things. First of all, if we use gender as a cultural thing, which is, I agree with going down that path. It's based on, what people have to remember is it's based on cultural norms. It's not based on what you feel. Now, so this is where words are important, because I would love to use man and woman as sex-based terms because they are definitive. You're either a man or a woman based on your phenotype. But so with gender, there are other words that actually fit into what you were saying: feminine and masculine. And now we've got this big giant spectrum that we can be on. So man and woman, we can define because it's a sex-based term. Whereas feminine or masculine is different. Now, again, this is the important part: cultural norms. Now, where the fluidity comes in, different cultures have different norms, as I alluded to
Right.
earlier.
But where sex and gender are connected is that was why that was why my personal definition of gender connected back to the biology of sex,
Well,
because
it's just
that
mathematics. Your extended phenotype, how you act in society and how you act in your environment, is going to be largely determined. I'm the Mr. No free will person, right? It's going to be largely determined by your sex chromosomes and
because
how they transcribe. Yeah.
yeah, that's I should have had you have the witchcraft ready of what those sex organs and what those chromosomes do to your hormones, and then what that means for both your physiology and your psychology.
Well, I mean, it's pretty dang easy because so you got XX and XY, right? And the default is that XX. We are default female unless we have that Y chromosome, because then the Y chromosome creates an environment where you have more testosterone and testosterone receptors, and so therefore that while you're in the fetus creates a penis and balls versus a uterus and ovaries. So that difference in the chromosomes starts that cascade. So that's number one. And then as you develop later, uh, it enhances everything that happened in the womb, depending on how much you have. If you're a high testosterone versus low testosterone male, you're going to develop just basically exaggerate the things that were already there. Whereas the female, you're going to have a higher estrogen environment. So XX, higher estrogen environment, more estrogen receptors. XY, the opposite, testosterone receptors. Now, where this gets a little complicated is I wanted to bring up the norms because where rights versus normalizing comes in is rights protect the exceptions to the rule versus normalize, which is to mold society around the exceptions to the rule. And that's the big difference. Where gay rights versus gay normalization, where everything needs to be gay.
You can't be discriminated against under the law for being a homosexual any more than you can for being a Methodist, right? And it's the same kind of idea, even though the kind of constitutional argument might be different. The moral argument really isn't much different.
Now, where this gets exceptionally complicated is in our development in the womb. There's kind of an order to things. It's kind of body then mind, body organs then mind, right? We're a little pea for a second, then we look like an alien, and then we go from there. And the length of time it takes the brain development is so the brain is actually more affected by the mother's testosterone or estrogen levels than the rest of the body. The rest of the body is kind of more affected by the gene that's in there, whereas the high testosterone or high estrogen environment can affect the brain more. And so you can, if you have a female in the womb and a super high testosterone environment in the mother, could be super stressed working, could be just a high testosterone female to begin with, could be diet, could be a lot of things that create this environment, then they're going to come out with all the outward appearance of female, but extreme male traits when it comes to behavior. And when you actually break apart, do brain scans and everything, they have a female body with a male brain in the difference in physiology. So what do you do with that person? It's the exception to the rule, right?
Well, a couple points on that, and I was hoping you'd come back to you'd sock you back to the exceptions, because as you mentioned at the back at the beginning, very very rarely you can have something other than XX or XY. All right, but
okay, so those are the most obvious ones. I was going to talk about more normal exceptions to the rule.
I want to go with the most extreme first, and here's why. Because I think it's rather sickening the way trans activists have hijacked this idea, because the people pushing for trans activism, they aren't these exceptions. They're something else. They're all mental. They're all wanting to do their own, make up their own gender and say, this is what I am now. So that's the first point, is that it's, if somebody is actually one of these exceptions, that's one thing. And as you said, all right, well, we need to make sure that they are legally protected. But the other point is, just because there are those exceptions, that doesn't suddenly destroy what male and female are, or even masculine and feminine. Those are exceptions. We do not define things by the exceptions, by definition.
This is, I'm trying to word this properly because it can be inflammatory. This is where our increasingly narcissistic society plays into it, because a narcissist will try to mold the world around them versus try to live in the world that they're in. And these movements, by their very nature, again, I'm speaking at this point past the rights movement. So I call it the normalization movement, but it's the mold the world around you movement. It's this thing exists. I want the world to fit around me versus me fit into the world. And yeah, it's part of the process with that is to create more people with that mentality. Okay, so if I'm going to normalize being transsexual, then I need to take children who are very moldable and convince as many as possible that they are that as well, and make it a bigger thing than it actually is artificially, so that we have to, as a society, mold around it. And it's actually beneficial for you in that society to be this exception to the rule. I wanted to go into more exceptions because there's some cool ones. XXY, XXX is it's really, really, really rare. And it's actually not as dramatic as some of the other things. Like the high testosterone female is a little bit more common, and it actually manifests more into what would actually be in this movement. Or it just end up being a lesbian down the road.
Well, before we get off onto another point here, I want to get back to what you were talking about with the narcissism. That to me is, so I was texting someone after the first time we talked about Leah Thompson, because I was annoyed, and we'd called the Florida bill the anti-grooming bill, and I stand by that. But because of my or our natural compunctions towards being overprotective of children, even, I have a hard time steel manning this argument. So I asked somebody, I asked a friend, look, I can't steel man this argument. So, what do you say about this? And one of the points he made was, something to the effect of, look, we have to figure something out so that these people can compete. And my first thought was, why? You don't have
my first thought is separate division.
Well, we have that. It's called the male division. Go swim there, Leah.
Well, I mean, you still have the transitionary hormones and stuff. They do affect performance. They don't make you, not to the degree that you should be competing with women, but they do affect
performance. As is evidenced by the fact that he was, beating people beating NCAA Division I championship swimmers by whole pool lengths.
Well, I'm gonna keep this on task though.
But
We
what
talked
are
about definition of woman, and now we're talking about sports. That's why it's so important
mhm.
to make clear what's sex and what's gender, because competing in women's sports, now women I consider a sex term, right? Competing in women's sports is about biological advantage. It is not about social acceptance.
Well, hold that thought, because that's where I was going there, because I wanted to get your expertise in witchcraft on that. But from the political and philosophical side, my thought was you don't have a God-given right to compete in a sport. Okay, if and this goes all the way back to my continued rant about gay marriage. Is one of my points when I was being called all sorts of Bible thumping bigot was, okay, look, if you're two dudes and you want to shack up and have a civil union, good for you, but you can't be married, because marriage is a specific thing and you don't fit that definition any more than you can you and your dude couple can adopt a child, but you can't be a mother because you don't fit that definition. All right, Leah Thompson, you've decided to live your life this way and be this thing and do this stuff to your body. Good for you. That means you can't go and compete here in this division, because this division is for women. So you can do whatever you want with your life because you're an adult, but you don't have an inherent right to then be uh what's the word I'm looking for? To have everyone bend over backwards. And what was the term you put of uh about a narcissist? Instead of living in the world, they want the world to conform to them.
Yeah, they want the
Yeah.
world. Yeah, and this is really important with our social media and this online world we're going into, especially as parents. There are mechanisms within social media right now that are trying to make you more narcissistic, because where do you go if you need to form the world around you? You go to the meta.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not this, I want to create narcissists. It's I want to engage people. And in that engagement, they're going to go down this path that makes them engage me more. They're looking for clicks. They're looking for ad revenue. They're looking for all of these other things. Now, not to say they don't know it's a byproduct. It just wasn't their intent to begin with. They know that this Dr. Z Dog and that Schmachtenberger interview that we were listening to. I finally finished it, and I'm going to steal their term: subclinical mental illness.
Hmm.
Subclinical mental illness. It's only detectable because you notice it at a large scale. That the society is going down this path, but it is what they said. The three were anxiety, depression, narcissism, have all increased based on what's going on with the webverse,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to get even worse with VR.
Way worse. All right, so
Did I pull this up when I was going through Twitter one day? I got an ad, and this is right along these lines, and I screenshotted it because I didn't want to actually click on it. Pictures. See if I can find it really
And then,
quick. Go down your thought, and
well, then get back to your point. I want to hear the rest of your point about why separate sex definition, male and female, why separate divisions exist and why they matter. If the Leah Thompson example wasn't enough, or I brought up the FloJo example, there was, so I don't remember if Serena or Venus have gotten uber I am woman hear me roar lately. You can actually find interviews like 5, 6, 7 years ago where people were talking about how talking to one of them, and you know you're so awesome, and she admitted, no, I couldn't compete on the men's division. That's because people were talking about how she was dominating the women's division. I couldn't compete in the men's division. And there's a story that at the Australian Open like 10 years ago, she played a pickup match with a guy who was ranked like 150th in the world. And never won a match while the guy was smoking. Now, I don't know if that's partially exaggerated, but it is a fairly well-known story.
So this came
Oh, my
across my
stars and
Twitter
garters.
feed. What, you're always online in your parents' basement and you can't find a girl? I'll keep you company. Look at it. Hey, babe, you up? Just laying in bed, kind of lonely today. And it actually goes through like a conversation with it. I should have got more of it before I took the screenshot, but
you used to have to call a 900 number for this kind of stuff.
yeah.
All right. Well,
but no, that's the important part about terminology, though. So what possibly my best answer for this possible Supreme Court justice would have been, are you referring to woman as sex, or are you referring to woman as gender? Make her specify. If you're saying woman, the sex of being female, the sex of woman, okay, yes, a biologist can answer better than I can, but it has to do with your reproductive organs or whatever. And if they said gender, they say, whoa, okay, now we've got a spectrum. And now we got to make the definition, should sports be separated by sex or gender? And of course, any reasonable person out there, other than an activist, would say by sex, because you have definitive things that make it fair or unfair, right? But yeah, any sport requiring basically size, strength, speed, or any variation of that is going to be dominated by men. And it doesn't mean the best woman is worse than every man, obviously, overlapping bell curves, as we talked about before. But that when you're talking elite sports, it's the tails of the curve. The top 500 male swimmers are at the extreme tail end, 2 standard deviations from the norm of that curve, including, I can't dead name him, but the former Leah Thompson manifestation before he leveled up, I guess. And then so he was in the tail of that bell curve. We just saw no female is even touching that portion of the tail of the bell curve.
Here's a practical example from my own experience of how that is, why that is. When I coached youth wrestling, I would roll with the kids sometimes if somebody didn't have a partner. And even if it was somebody, and we had some hefty kids, as you know, because that's the world we live in now. So, and I wasn't as big as I am now. I was down about 180, and there were some kids that were my weight or more. And so I would roll with them because we didn't have we only had a couple of heavyweights.
Can I pause this for just a second?
Okay.
Sorry, everybody. I have lots of construction projects going on here, so I'll have to go unload a truck bed full of rocks here in a minute. So we're going to kind of, in 10 minutes or so, conclude this conversation, and then we'll come back with another topic if we want to tonight.
Let me finish my example of why the male and female divisions of sports matters. And then if you want to add any technical terms to that. So coaching wrestling, I'm practicing with kids who are as big as I am. And yet I have to be very careful not to manhandle them, because even though they have that mass of 170, 180 pounds, they don't have the muscle density of a 170, 180 pound man, right? Because they have not had the impact of that testosterone yet,
or the lungs or the heart, or
the lungs or the heart. Or so then, fast forward a few months, and during the Christmas break, those kids that were still in town, we went and we practiced with the high schoolers who were still in town. And so I helped out the heavyweights, and after 20 seconds, I had to go, oh, hold on, wait a minute, because there's that big of a difference that I actually had to not be lazy and pay attention to what I was doing, so that I would be a challenge and give that high schooler a worthwhile practice, because there's that much of a difference just in that 3 to 4 years of age. Okay, well, now add a few more years onto that when you're talking about collegiate or, Olympic or professional competition. And you've got that much more impact of those sexual characteristics.
And the important point here, before I move on to the exception that I wanted to bring a kind of a hypothetical with Heath, is it's the developmental stages. It's not the testosterone they're pumping at that point he rolled with them. It's what that testosterone did throughout puberty. And that's what Leah Thompson still has. She doesn't have the serum testosterone of a man her age right now, but she did during development. And I should have brought it up. There's something floating around that was something about up to 2 years. The data suggests that even on TRT, or not TRT, hormones suppression, that there's an advantage over females if you were male, and it's up to two. And it was a 2-year long study, and it's being used. Let's put quotations around used to say, well, she was on for 3 years, so she's outside of that 2 years. She doesn't have an advantage. No, that's not how science works, my friends. The study was 2 years. If they had kept going, it probably, in fact, I don't know if it's an ongoing study or not, but they just published the first 2 years data. No, that's not, it doesn't just drop off because they didn't study further. It's, yeah, we can't say we know they'll have an advantage at 3 years, but it's probably pretty much intuition at that point. Now, what I wanted to give to you, so we're talking about male, female, right? And what you would define somebody as. Let's take a case called androgen insensitivity syndrome. So what this person is they have an XY chromosome, but something went wrong, and their androgen receptors in their body, which are the ones that bind to testosterone to do their thing, are all out of whack. So their androgen receptors will not bind to the testosterone, so the testosterone can do its thing in the body. So it just floats in the blood free until it dies away and goes away. And so they're producing testosterone like a developing male in the womb, but it's not doing anything. So again, default is woman, right?
So it's not having those secondary characteristic
it's
effects.
having no effects. Yeah. So default is woman. So if you do not have the testosterone pumping through, you will have a uterus, ovaries, all of that. So this person is born, they look like a female, they act like a female, they smell like a female, they must be a female. They have a vagina, everything, all women characteristics. But then they hit puberty and they don't menstruate. And then later on, they cannot have children, they're sterile. And everybody's wondering, well, there just must be something wrong with them. They can have, usually at puberty that this is discovered, and no menstruation, no secondary stuff from puberty, but because you're out of the womb now, there's no default development now. You're just growing. And if you have high estrogen, you grow into more, again, it exaggerates those female characteristics. And if you have high testosterone, it exaggerates the male. Well, now we're in a state where there's no high estrogen or the testosterone is not binding. So they're just growing. They still look like a female, but they're not becoming more female. They're not menstruating. They're not doing any of that. So they do a blood test, do a genetic test, find out this person has an XY chromosome. So technically they're male, but they're female. What do you classify that person as?
I have no idea.
Because they technically look like a female. They can go through their entire life being a straight female, even though they're actually chromosomally male. So is that a male or a female? Is that a man or a woman?
That is the kind of exception that we would have to decide legally if we want to legislate around. And again, to quote the great philosopher Dennis Leary, life sucks, get a fucking helmet.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to this individual if you can't do all the other things that normal people are doing. That being said, this is also why I'm not a psychiatrist or a counselor. Um, that, you know, on a cultural level, just don't treat that person like crap. That's not that hard. And
Well, this is a dilemma for parents because you have two options there. You can inform the child that they're actually a male and try to reconstruct them into a male, which some try to do. Or you can just keep pretending they're a girl and a doctor say, well, you can't have kids, you're infertile, but the rest of you is going to be fine.
I don't know how dangerous we want to get here about my opinions on surgery.
Well, you know my opinions on surgery, especially since I've been through quite a few, is 100% necessary or don't do it. One of my pet peeves with some of the ladies I work with is they keep having these cosmetic things done. And yes, they're small, but they keep adding up. And the effects of things like anesthesia, etc., and the wear and tear in your body, the damaged cells, they all add up. And you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot in a lot of ways just because you saw a line in the mirror, right?
Yeah.
Now I had to have this surgery because otherwise it would never heal because it would just atrophy and go away. And there's a few surgeries I've had that seemed necessary at the time, like my ablation. Now in hindsight, I feel like I robbed Peter to save Paul on that one. So absolutely, positively, whenever necessary. So I would probably be the parent that just let her live as a girl. And even though I had that knowledge, maybe when they're an adult, I would tell them, but because I do want like to live in honesty as well. But that's a hard one, and it's
Yeah. And this is where I go
well,
back
maybe
to
maybe the right thing is tell them when they're an adult and let them decide whether they're going to
and this is
pursue.
where I go back to the Dave Rubin example of what he was talking about and this is what scares me about the level of activism that has infiltrated what should be uh rational, scientific as much as possible, biological as much as possible questions of I worry for that parent who has to make that choice of, are you getting good advice or are you talking to someone who is an activist and so is telling you, no, you have to go do the surgery because this is that girl is a boy, so you need to do the surgery. That's what's best for that child. You're not giving good advice, you're giving biased advice, you're giving your thoughts on it, and there's a lot of that out there.
Well, let's put a pin in this for now. If we want to continue the conversation today, I've got to go unload a truck bed full of rocks so she can go get a truck bed full of sand for me to load. So this is her project, but I'm
Yes,
the
but
muscle.
you have the secondary sex characteristics of testosterone, so have fun lifting things.
All right. See you in a bit. Oh. All right. Sorry for that hiccup. I had to do some honeydews. And just so everybody knows what those honeydews were, let me show you. There is no easy way to do that job because you can't just scoop it like sand because it's rocks. You can't just brush it out like sand because it's rocks. So that was a hell of a workout. Get in shape, people.
You need an incline
Well,
to park on.
you know, they need to start making these trucks with you know, the little dump truck back so you can just dump it out. But for those of you, the Tesla crowd out there, you know, gas prices, just go get a Tesla. Let me go ahead and borrow your Tesla and we're going to dump some rocks in your trunk and then unload them and see how much you like it. Trucks are still useful. I still think we skimp on, you know, that whole hybrid phase, you know, rolling them out to useful trucks. That would have been nice. But other than that, mine's kind of somewhat like a hybrid, not an electric to gas hybrid, but when you get into cruise on like the freeway, it drops from an 8-cylinder to a 4-cylinder. So it basically doubles your gas mileage, which is cool. So I switched trucks just in time because
Yeah,
that Tundra was a gas hog.
more cars are doing that now, which makes
Well, and
a
I
lot of
think we
sense.
could have spent more time in
Yeah,
that space and made it a little better, and then transitioned to the gas hybrid, electric hybrids, and then transition to the full electric once we, have an infrastructure to support it and good models. I hear the trucks aren't bad, the electric trucks, but
the one of the YouTubers I watched, the Rageaholic, he put out a video after I think it was Butt Gigs comments on, oh, you wouldn't notice the gas prices if you got an electric car, and the title of his video was "Let Them Drive Cake." Because it is very much a let them eat cake moment of, yeah, just buy an electric car. Those things like at the bottom are like $60,000, and that's not even like a Tesla. That's not like a good electric car. That's like the name brand crappy ones, because the Teslas are basically the only good ones out there right now. So, and those are even more. Speaking of cake, I sent you a video because I have something I want to rant about. But first, I want to get your take on it.
Okay, so let's recap and wrap up the last thing. We talked about the justice, defining woman, define the terms. I think that's where we should be going with the argument, is defining terms and saying which is legal and which is opinions. Legal shouldn't be, I mean, they call them an opinion in their decision, but I mean, what's written is what's written.
And again, you can feel however you want to feel. You can live however you want to live as an adult in a free country. But that doesn't mean everyone else is compelled to celebrate your life. That doesn't mean everyone has to agree with your life. In the same way that I can see someone who's got the giant gauges in his ear and think, that's gross. You look like a weirdo. That's, you do you, buddy, but I think it's weird and gross.
And I take a little bit more of a, I guess, righteously neutral position where it's, okay, this is what is, these are the things that affect that, and that's how I make my decisions on it. There's no judgment calls other than what is an unfair advantage when we're talking about sports, and what is actually within and outside of the control of the individual when it comes to hiring decisions and things like that, immutable characteristics that don't affect the job. If your job was scooping rock out of the back of trucks, probably going to be looking for the right man for the job. Because
and you don't really care how many tattoos he has.
My wife kept saying, I'll do it. I'll just take my time and everything. I'm like, and I'm sweating bullets out there doing this about a third of the way through. And I was like, yeah, not that I don't think you'll eventually get it done, but if we want it done today, it's going to
take a minute.
It's going to take a minute because, I'm stronger than your average man. And I was still using about 90% force production in some of those moments to get some of that out of there. So, but if your job is, I don't name a job we can all do equally.
I mean, any sort of sitting at a desk using a computer, which is what a lot of jobs are.
We'll take my job, personal trainer, right? Athletic coach, strength and conditioning coach. From a knowledge standpoint, from a executing your daily activity standpoint, it doesn't matter what gender you are. Clients will prefer one or the other a lot of the time, but from an ability standpoint, there is no difference. I have met amazing female strength coaches. I've met amazing male strength coaches. I have met spectacularly crappy female coaches. I've met spectacularly douchey, crappy male coaches. It's something we can all do equally if you apply yourself. Now, didn't Francis Ngannou work in like a stone quarry or a sand pit or something before he went to the UFC?
I don't know.
Now I understand why he's built the way he is. I think that was what it was. It was like in his home country, he worked in like a rock quarry or sand pit or something like that.
Well, my wrap up for our talk about gender is, look, however you feel on the spectrum of masculine and feminine, however you want to present yourself to the world, that doesn't change the category which you are. To me, that's like saying people of different ethnicities are different species. No, we're all Homo sapiens. You just happen to have more or less melanin than the guy next to you, right? So that is the absurdity of the ever growing number of genders is, look, you're not changing the categories of human. Humans are sexually reproducing species, and that translates in various ways culturally, sociologically, in this idea of gender and this idea of masculine and feminine. And if you want to come up with a new term to more accurately describe that, fine, but understand what you're describing.
I told you we already had the terms though. Masculine, feminine. Again, separate gender terms from sex terms.
Right.
And that was the big deal about the woman, because that's one that is equally used for gender and for sex. And that's where the argument comes from. We just need to decide, does woman describe sex or does woman describe gender?
And if you go down the rabbit hole of looking at these in these people's own words of what some of these, the plus sign at the end, what some of these different genders mean, a lot of them are just like bizarre, esoteric, niche sexualities. You do you, bro, but that doesn't mean you get to change your pronouns and I have to, accept your life that way.
That is one of the confounding factors that I don't get in this whole thing. Again, because I do think of things from a scientific standpoint. When we cross the line adding sexuality to gender, because gender is how you fit into the social norms of your femininity and masculinity, or your neutrality to either of those.
Yeah,
that's where you fit in. That's where it is. Yes, correct. Postmodernist. It is a cultural construct of some sort, but incorrect. It has nothing to do with your sexuality. You can be feminine till the cows come home and still be into chicks. You can be masculine beyond belief. You can be Gaston, but be Brokeback Mountain at the same time. Your gender actually has nothing to do with your sexuality.
And I have gone down these rabbit holes out of morbid curiosity, and a lot of them are, well, let's just take one example. Demisexual. Do you know what a demisexual it is?
That's the one that never has a good definition. I know that one.
Okay, well, the definition I've seen most consistently is it's someone who does not feel sexual attraction without some sort of relationship bond. So this is someone who is
so basically every female.
We're not supposed to say that these days, but yeah.
Basically myself.
That's
as a dude.
Yeah.
I have friends that will hook up every night of the week with someone random, and I could never be that person, even though I've been arguing for polyamory, because there is something to the romance. Yeah. There is something to the courtship that adds to the experience. Like I said, why pick between oxytocin and testosterone when you can have both?
Yeah. How is this a sexuality? How is, let alone a new gender? Look, that's your psychological and personal sexual preferences when it comes to relationships with another human.
Well, the first one to jump in the mix was asexual. They're calling that a gender. And I'm like, no, that's a sexual preference. It's actually lack of sexual preference. And or sexual drive, I should say. because you could still like boys, but not like anybody at the moment, and you're asexual. And that was the one that really drove in, and that one's getting worse because again, I'm going to say this metaverse where you're creating the world around yourself, and to actually be sexual in a sexually reproducing species, you do need to be social, pro-social in some way, shape, or form.
And I think that's that's the hammer on the head of the nail. There is the narcissism and the lack of social interaction is why this seems to be accelerating so much in the past few years. It's because, back to the Leah Thompson example of, okay, you're a girl now, you want to live your life this way, fine, but we're not obligated to let you into the women's swimming division. It's the women's swimming division. It's not the Leah Thompson swimming division, right? It's you so desperately, and I think this started to happen when we were kids. The self-esteem movement, which conflated the idea that everyone is unique with everyone is special. And I go to one of the best Pixar movies, The Incredibles, because that's one of the best bad guys. When everybody is special, no one will be. Right? That was an astounding line from that movie, because I'm like, you people don't believe that. The people in Hollywood that wrote this movie and did this movie don't really believe that, but it's true. That's a problem. Look, not everyone is special. Everyone is unique. Everyone is different. But I mean, we talk about fitness a lot and athleticism. Just look at that by its definition, and the tiny, tiny end of the bell curve that gets you into elite athleticism, or the tiny, tiny end of the bell curve that gets you into, the professional arts, whether it be musician or comedian or actor or whatever.
You brought up something before with I think it was in the first discussion we had on Thompson, is you talked about all the basketball players, just teams of guys identifying as females, and they would be like the ultimate troll. And it really would. And I actually may change my mind on something, because I didn't agree with you then. I thought it would be just too in your face, but I actually maybe I'm becoming more cynical, but I think it actually might be what we need, because we need some slaps in the face as a nation. There's just, hey, this is getting ridiculous, and then this is on a broad range of issues, but on this particular issue, maybe that's what we need. And I was like, that's kind of the ultimate troll. And I know you always complain about the anarcho-capitalist, but you and Michael Malice have something in common there. He loves the troll, and he says the troll is the best way to fight the system right now. So
well, because I think that goes back to your tiers of, critical race theory people, is the people at the top, the true believers. That's a very small number, but you have a much bigger grouping of people in those bottom groups who just,
well, and those second two groups that are the good people just wanting to be good, and they're only separated by the degree of what they believe is the problem. They're kind of drunk on the empathy hit, and realistically, to use the drunk analogy, they need to be doused with some cold water. And this, I think a good troll might actually be in order, and it has to be perfect. It has to be like middling college players going to the WNBA, right?
Like guys who couldn't make it through the G League or whatever, and so then they end up putting on a wig.
Or even, and this isn't to take away from them, because you met a lot of them. Most of my friends are in this group, but the Lifetime League players, that we've already gotten out of college and couldn't go on, or retired from a lowly career in basketball. They're just really, really good compared to the general population.
It's a rec league, but they're they're legitimate athletes and they're hyper competitive males.
Mm-hmm.
And, what could someone like that do if he put on a wig and started taking estrogen besides get, cancer?
That therein lies the problem to the troll, though. You would have to convince enough men to do the hormone replacement for 2 years.
Yeah. Well, assuming that's what the rules were for who knows what even the rules are. Those keep changing even to be funky. Anyway, that's all I got for that. Oh shoot, crap. I was ready.
While you're getting that thought, let me close my window here and open the AC vent.
All right. Well,
it's hot here.
I was about to transition to something fun, and then I remembered that I had a thought while I was trimming and seasoning a brisket, which is much more fun than what we're going to talk about. And so I had to send Sam a video of something completely and totally absurd. And this actually does connect in with what we were just talking about, because the video I sent you, the link I sent you, is about the complete destruction of terms, specific terms that mean something specifically, and the uber narcissism of our culture.
Okay,
that's what we're talking about here.
So we've been having trouble with the sound when Heath shares something here. So he sent me the link and it sounded a lot better. But do you have any timestamps on this, or do you
just watch it for as long as you can stomach it?
Okay.
Model Tess Holliday revealing her battle with anorexia. With eating disorders on the rise during the pandemic, Kana Whitworth spoke exclusively to Holliday about her struggle and what she wants others to know. Good morning, Kana.
Michael, good morning. Now, she says it was hard for her to hear that diagnosis, confusing even. And this morning, she says she's proof that eating disorders don't discriminate.
This morning, supermodel Tess Holliday revealing her struggle with anorexia. The mother of two saying she was recently diagnosed by a psychologist, but has ultimately been struggling with disordered eating most of her life.
I always thought that I overate. But then people in my life would say, oh yeah, I eat more than Tess. And it was almost like I wore it as a badge of honor.
Known for loving and celebrating her curves as a body positive activist, Holliday has been receiving support for her honesty from many, but also being questioned by some online about how she could love her body and also have an eating disorder.
I've had a lot of messages from folks that are anorexic that are livid and angry because they feel like I'm lying. I am plus size, but advocating for diversity and larger bodies. And so I think for people hearing me say I'm anorexic was really jarring.
Holliday's dietitian, Anna Sweeney, says if you think that most eating disorders are visible conditions, you're wrong. Eating disorders don't have to look a certain way.
I understand that people look at me and I don't fit what we have.
Okay, so I think I know the direction we have to go here. So first of all, the APA is broken, but we might have a terminology issue here. Let me look up the APA's definition for anorexia. Maybe
they've changed it to something bizarre.
Mm-hmm. APA definition. Eating disorders, APA. Okay, so let me make sure this is current. Yeah, 2021. Okay. So let's share this. And I can tell you already, it does not meet their definition. Individuals believe they're fat even when they're dangerously thin and restrict their eating to point of starvation. She knew she was fat. Well,
no, she's plus sized. She's body positive. How dare you, Sam?
Okay, so Was she restricting her eating is the question. Because she thought she was fat. That's the question. Was she restricting her eating because she thought she was fat? She says she thought she ate too much. I don't know. I don't think it meets their definition. I don't know where her psychologist would have pulled this from. I mean, this is directly from the APA, apa.org, eating disorders, 2021. They did not need to interview Tess. They need to interview the psychologist.
Yeah.
Except, well, the psychologist can't technically talk about Tess.
Well, no.
But you can ask questions like, what do you define
define
anorexia to be? First of all, there's plenty of laws of thermogenics that I can point to that show that you can't be restricting your diet and become Tess.
That. Yeah. How much would you say she weighs?
I think I've seen it before. It's like 500.
Wow.
Something.
So
because I've seen documentaries on her before.
The amount of calories you have to eat to maintain that amount of mass.
And I'm going to get ahead of something because there are low metabolism disorders, some of them from birth, some of them multi-generational from birth. If you had a grandmother that was in the womb of someone who was starving when they were in the womb, they had a metabolic disorder and that went down the line. But the range of what, so say we'll use simple numbers, 2,000 is maintenance calories. And you have this disorder.
She's just big boned, Sam.
I hate you. Which way? Okay, so this is less. All right. So say this is normal. Say you have this metabolic disorder. It goes this way, right here. Maybe a little thyroid issue right here. But it's still not here. It's still not, I can hardly eat anything without ballooning up. Right? There are laws of physics. For me to stand up and move to the other side of the room, there is a certain amount of energy I have to expend. My body may be better at it because my parent was starving when I was in her womb, but there's still some minimum point of energy to get up and perform the action. And the bigger you are, the more energy is required to do that. So at some point, if you're this person, you get big enough, then that metabolic shift goes this way because you're doing more work just to move. I mean, I know there's no objective science, but it's just physics, people.
Yeah.
Thermodynamics.
I guarantee it. So we've mentioned this before when we talk generally about diet. Is one of the first things I always tell people to do is track your calories. You know,
you ain't tracking, you ain't trying.
Now, most people will drive you crazy if you do it forever, but you at least need to do it for that first week that you're starting out a diet and exercise program to give yourself an idea of where you're at. Because I guarantee you're eating more calories than you think you are. And that's why I emphasize you count every single thing you put in your mouth, even if it's a stick of gum. Because I know that what they're really ingesting that they're not thinking about are those 500 calorie drinks from Starbucks.
Okay, so this can lead into fitness advice. Now, I am not giving specific advice for any individual. I'm giving some general guidelines for you to follow. So there's the disclaimer. I'm giving some general guidelines that I have recommended in the past and I have seen work in the past. And this is we're just discussing starting points, right? So go onto MyFitPal or any one of those, put in your height, weight, gender, sex. We're dealing with biology. See, I just broke the rule I was saying we need to have, right? That's how ingrained some of this stuff is. Your height, weight, sex, activity level, and it's going to pop out a number that says, this is your maintenance calories. That number is a pretty good number. There's a lot of research that's gone into this, and it's based on those factors. as long as you're honest about your activity level, it's going to be decently accurate on a population level. And this is where we have to start, population level. And then, so people ask me, well, how do I know if I have a thyroid issue, or I have this that might be affecting that, or maybe I take this med and it supposedly brings you down? Take that first number, and for 2 weeks, you try to stick as close to that number as possible. Now, at the end of those 2 weeks, it's simple. Did I gain weight? Did I lose weight? Or did I stay exactly the same? If I stayed exactly the same, guess what? Population level numbers for me. If I gained weight, I got a lower metabolism. So we can shift that number down and experiment a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
If I lost weight, awesome. This is going to be easier than I thought. And that's rarely the case, because most people trying to lose weight aren't on that side of the thing. But if I lost weight, my metabolism as a human being individual is higher than the population average for some reason. Could be genetic, could be I didn't realize I was more physical in my job than I am, any number of reasons. So that's the start. 2 weeks, track and try to stay as close to that baseline as possible. Don't go into a deficit yet. Don't go into an increase yet. Do maintenance. And then at the end of those, you've got an easy calculation. I gained 2 pounds. Well, shoot, that's a lot of weight for 2 weeks to gain. I lost 2 pounds. Awesome. Just keep doing that for a while. You're gonna do great, because your metabolism's better than normal, and you can just stick with that. You can eat more than most people that are trying to lose 2 pounds. And or I stayed the same. I stayed the same. Now we just go by the numbers that are every general fitness, educator out there should know, because you're the average. We've done everything off the average, so it's easy. Lose 3,500 calories a week, you'll lose a pound of fat. All right, cool. All right, all the equations work. But that's the easiest way to start. Now, I'm still blown away. Her anorexia. This is, first of all, she's prescribing a mental disorder to this person, right? And I'm trying to think how you do behavioral therapy based on that. Because what I would think would be the starting point is just what I said. Find out her baseline calories that should maintain her weight, and then see what she's eating. If she's eating less than that and she's still big, we've got another issue we've got to look for. If she's eating that and she stays the same, then okay, cool. You're not anorexic. You're just eating enough to maintain your bigness. And if she gains weight on that, or if she loses weight on that maintenance calorie, well, cool. Let's keep going. How do you even diagnose that? She's obviously not restricting her calories, not to a dangerous level anyways.
Clearly. The dangerous level's on the other end. And this is what's so infuriating about people like Tess Holliday, is it's not just, look, I'm not going to make fun of you if you're a big old gal or a big old corn-fed dude. If you're trying, right? Mm-hmm. She's doing the opposite of trying. She is celebrating her dangerous unhealth and pushing other people to be like her. So it's worse than just, I'm going to live my life. I'm going to live my life, and I'm going to try and convince as many other people as I can to live that same life, even though trust the experts, trust the science. Except now, I guess, because everything we know says that is incredibly unhealthy.
Well, and that's where, again, words matter. Biological versus social, right? Healthy is a biological term. It is not a cultural term. Is my body going towards or away from optimal performance? Mm-hmm. And to include aging as performance, right? Is my body going towards or away from it? That determines health. On the other end, the cultural end, attraction or self-worth or anything along those lines. Self-esteem, I guess, goes into that part of it. Now, I'm not put aside self-esteem for now, because that's an interplay where you get self-esteem by being healthier, but also you should still have self-esteem if you aren't considered attractive to the opposite sex or whatever, or you're not where you want to be. You still should have that self-esteem, but then use that to drive you towards that health, right? So set that aside. But cultural acceptance, cultural attractiveness, things along those lines, that's a different issue. They're not even in the same category. So we can't even discuss them at the same time. And that's where the body positivity movement fucks everything up. Because just like the gender and sex mix up, they're saying body positive and health as one and the same. And that's not the case. Not even your mental health case, because again, we're talking about narcissistic tendencies. The world should revolve around me and adjust to me, because I can't fit in an airplane seat. So
you can think that all you want, but it's not going to stop obesity from being I think it's the number one comorbidity now.
With what?
With anything.
With anything? Yeah.
Oh.
Let's see if I said I was going to look for some of this real time, but
yeah. So it's, I mean, I guess not counting age, being old, that's generally what kills you. But
age will get you every time. You
know. I know for a long time it was smoking, but we don't do that as much anymore. Instead, we eat lots of Taco Bell. So it's, obesity is up there with all sorts of, I mean, obviously the ones people know the most are the heart problems and diabetes, but it goes along with all number of things, because it throws your hormones out of whack, and it adds stress to your joints, adds stress to your internal organs, and puts you in a basically a low grade total body inflammatory response.
Let me get a date on this. 2017. So this is pretty new. Where did that number go? Dang it, I saw a number in the intro before I clicked on it, and I am looking for it in the actual study. So this is the name of this study is Morbidity and Mortality Associated with Obesity. And the little intro on the search is for every 5 kilograms per meter squared. So they're using BMI. Mortality associated with kidney disease increases 60%. And
that's a lot.
Yeah. But they have a lot of different illnesses associated with this. So, okay.
That's something we might call statistically significant.
Well, not only significant. So statistic significance is the repeatability of it, basically. So we can count on that result. So even if it's a minor increase, but it's consistently that increase, that's statistically significant. Now the magnitude is a different term, and that has a high magnitude. And if it's consistently 60%, then we're significant as well. So magnitude and significance are kind of two different things, but they do bring it up. Let's look at diabetes here. So BMI 27 to 29, the risk will rise up by 100% for diabetes. Okay, so now let's go to the chart of what these are. 27 to 29, you're not even obese yet. You're just overweight. And again, You BMI haters out there, BMI is a good population level measure. It is not a good individual measure. I am overweight by BMI, but I am obviously not fat. So, in fact, if I gained 4 pounds, I would be obese, I think. I need to get 4 pounds of muscle on me.
Chicken fried steak day.
Oh, well, my guilty pleasure is fried chicken. And I fall at about once every other month, and I'll eat the whole bucket in one go. I love fried chicken. Yeah, so we're talking just overweight, the risk rises by 100%. And if you go above that overweight, 300%. 300% increase in diabetes. Now, what's the original risk rate? Do they have it here? Probably in the studies they cite. But so it does depend on what the original risk rate was. So if that was your original risk of diabetes was 2%, which has got to be more than that in this country, then it increases to 4%. Would be the 100%, and then the 300% would be
Well, and
CVD.
Yeah.
What is CVD? Cardiovascular disease. Okay. Hypertension. Obese patients are 3 to 5 times more likely to have hypertension. Airway. So you don't want to wear a CPAP, don't get bigger. Kidney disease. This is the one that I saw. For every 5 BMI points you go up, you increase by 60% for having kidney disease. That's significant. That's a pretty high magnitude. Liver. Yeah, fatty liver, guys. You don't just get it from drinking. Again, 60% increase. 10% increase in cirrhosis. Gonads. Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. You can take my life, but not my sex. Gastro reflux. That's pretty common. Cancer. I thought that was not associated, but because of the estrogen levels.
Yeah, different specific types.
Yeah. So basically, yes, I'll link this article. I'll keep it here. I'll link this article in the show notes for those that want to read the whole thing. All of these different increases in mortality and morbidity, and morbidity is important. People are like, oh, it didn't kill me, but are you living good? You know, if you get fat and get ED, are you having fun? You know, no, it's not the best life you can have. And when we talk about depression and everything, you can feel that. You can feel when you're not living well. It doesn't matter how body positive you are. You still have this deep down gnawing loss, especially when you look out. And this is probably what, to your point of trying to encourage more people to be like that. You see other people living well because they're healthy. That gnaws at you. We've talked about this on the socio-economic level. The stress involved with social status economically is not with being poor, it's being poorer than the person next to you, the person in close proximity to you. And now with social media, everybody's close proximity to everybody. So if you are living a suboptimal life physically, you notice that when you see people who are living the good life physically. They're out there having more fun, they have more energy, they can kind of eat more what they want because they don't have to diet. They're having more sex. They're being treated better by other people because physical attractiveness is an equalizer when it comes to social interactions. So it's all of these things, and you notice you can be as body positive as you want. It's going to gnaw at you from the inside out, just like guilt does. It's kind of guilt towards your own body is what it is.
This is why the media has a lower approval rate than Congress, because
That's bad.
here they are giving this story their full attention and seriousness, and they're giving it all this gravity, and any rational person is going to look at Tess Holliday and go, what? And there's no thought to say, hold on, wait a minute, you're 500 pounds. What the hell do you mean you're anorexic? You know, there's no pushback because she's body positive. That's good, right?
Well, because one of the hosts on that, and this kind of ticks me off because it's hypocrisy. One of the hosts was Michael Strahan.
Mm-hmm.
He, for the longest time, until he got into mainstream media, i.e. on that talk show, was a huge fitness fanatic and you call somebody who tries to get it?
Advocate.
That's the word I was looking for. Yes. A huge fitness advocate. Hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm.
Intellectual inconsistency. I don't know how much more we can beat this one.
It's go do something healthy.
Yes, be a healthier America. We're going to do a part 2 on this with a little bit of wheel of time because we got to get some more Matt badassery. And I did not expect that one.
You're welcome.
No, this is good because this is important. And again, one of the biggest mistakes I've made in my entire life was that big long stretch of time where I was apolitical and I just wanted to mind my business and just wanted to go about my day and do my job and help the people around me. And all of this stuff was happening during that time. And this actually bleeds over to what I do. And I could have been on a macro level trying to combat that while I was on the micro level trying to combat that. And yeah, that was a mistake. And so now it makes me a little bit more upset at everything that goes on with that as well, because I'm a little bit upset with myself. Remember our shame and guilt talk. I'm susceptible to guilt. You can almost not shame me at all, but and Heath will attest to that.
Says the guy who got kicked out of a Wendy's for taking his pants off.
Table dancing. I didn't get to the pants yet. I just had the shirt off.
He was working on it.
It was a dare. It was a $20 bet.
And who can say
I
no
was
to
poor. Huh?
Who can say no to $20?
Not 17-year-old Sam.
All right. We'll see y'all next time.
All right.